So it turns out my wife was involved with Ralph, a truck driver. The way I found out? His wife, Janice, told me. How did Janice know? Ralph inadvertently revealed it to her without realizing. Ralph drives trucks locally and is home every night. He and Janice share a laptop and cell phones. After work, they have dinner together, then Ralph spends hours on the laptop playing games and surfing the internet. Janice enjoys jigsaw puzzles on the computer, but rarely gets the chance because Ralph dominates it. A friend suggested she get an iPad, so they did, adding it to Ralph's account. Their relationship seemed fine, content with their jobs, home life, and weekly intimacy. Ralph used the laptop while Janice used her iPad. One evening, Janice found text messages on her iPad revealing Ralph's affair with another woman. Shocked, she confronted Ralph, who lied about texting dispatch. Later, Janice saw Ralph texting his lover about nearly being caught. She cried herself to sleep, then spent the night on the sofa. By morning, she decided to learn more about the other woman before taking action. Within a week, Janice discovered the woman's name, Gloria, a waitress at the truck stop where Ralph had breakfast. The next day, Janice went to the truck stop, found Gloria, and asked if her last name was Johnson. "No, it's Morris," Gloria replied. "Sorry, I must have mistaken you for someone else," Janice said. Janice hurried home, logged into Facebook, and found Gloria Morris. She discovered Gloria was married to Paul Morris, who was Janice's husband. From there, Janice visited my social media profile, figured out where I worked, and called me. "This is Paul Morris," I answered. "Mr. Morris, I'm Janice Godwin. We need to talk," she said urgently. "Why? What's this about?" I asked. "I can't discuss it over the phone, but it concerns your wife," Janice replied. "Could you elaborate on that?" I asked. "I'd prefer to talk in person, anytime, anywhere you choose," Janice insisted. "Unless I know what it's about, I'm not committing to a meeting," I responded firmly. There was a brief silence. "If there's nothing else, my husband is having an affair with your wife," Janice blurted out. "Excuse me?" I was taken aback. "Yes, they're having an affair," Janice repeated. "Are you sure you've got the right person?" I asked skeptically. "I am," Janice affirmed. "In that case, maybe we should meet," I suggested. I invited her to my office immediately, and she came. Janice showed me the text messages between Gloria and her husband. Initially, without Gloria's last name, I was skeptical. But when the text mentioned Gloria's workplace, it caught my attention. Some of the recent messages even mocked both Janice and me for being unaware. Janice and I discussed our next steps, leaning towards divorce but first wanting some payback. Not revenge intimacy, but psychological. Their affair was purely physical, which hurt even more. If it had been love, it would have been different. We felt like we must have done something wrong to drive our spouses to this. We decided to wait a couple of days, keeping up appearances while tracking their movements via Janice's iPad. Their meetings were random, always at the same motel. The next day, Janice informed me Ralph was meeting Gloria at 2 p.m. We went to the motel and waited. When Gloria arrived and booked the room, Janice and I kissed passionately nearby, ensuring Gloria saw us. She noticed, trying to hide her face as we walked away. At home, I took a rare afternoon shower. Gloria walked in soon after, clearly understanding what had happened. Seeing me with Janice had ended her mood. She awkwardly asked about my day, trying to make small talk. I smirked. "Oh, nothing much. Took a couple of hours off work to meet a friend." "Oh? Who was it?" "Just someone you don't know." "Why didn't you tell me you were taking time off? We could have done something together." "I didn't think you'd be interested. Seems like you've had other things on your mind lately." "Why would you say that?" "Just a hunch." The rest of the evening, she stuck to me like glue. She went out of her way to cook dinner, and afterwards she asked me to sit next to her on the couch instead of my recliner. When I did, she snuggled up close. She started touching me intimately, but I gently moved her hand away and declared, "I'm going to bed." "Good," she replied. "That's what I had in mind." "Not tonight," I said firmly. "I'm not in the mood." I pretended to be asleep when Gloria came to bed, shifting away when she touched my back. Exhausted, I slept deeply. Janice had a similar experience with her husband and reacted the same way. 3 days later, Gloria and Ralph met at the motel again. Thanks to Janice's iPad, we knew and repeated our stunt. This time, Ralph saw us. The same awkward events unfolded at our homes. Gloria questioned my afternoon shower again, and I offered a weak excuse. Their texts that evening showed their affair losing its allure. They blamed each other. Gloria claimed she loved me, not Ralph, and Ralph insisted he loved Janice. They speculated about how Janice and I met, given our differences. For 2 more weeks, we continued to thwart their attempts at intimacy, frustrating them. Eventually, they gave up, deciding to end their affair and focus on their marriages. But Janice and I had already decided to end ours. The day they ended their affair, they were served with divorce papers. When Gloria and I were home, I waited for the inevitable. She tried to talk, but I ignored her until the doorbell rang. She answered and received the papers, then turned back to me. "What's this?" she asked. "You know what it is. I'm divorcing you for adultery." "You can't do that." "I just did." "But you've been—" I cut her off. "I was watching you and Godwin. Janice and I didn't do anything. We just met so you'd see us and think we were having an affair, but we never were. You and him, though, met up every chance you got. Records from the motel show you two met at least once a week for the past 6 months." "How did you find out? We were so careful." "Careful?" I chuckled. "Everyone at the truck stop knew about you two. You can't keep secrets like that from people who love to gossip, especially your fellow waitresses." I hinted that one of her coworkers spilled the beans. I didn't reveal how we really found out. We might need it later. She sat down on the couch. "Can we talk about this?" She gestured toward the divorce papers. "Talk all you want, justify it all you want, but none of it changes the fact that you cheated and that's why I'm divorcing you." "Paul, it meant nothing. It was just for fun." "Fun? You cheated with another man for fun? Wasn't closeness with me fun enough? That just makes it worse." "Thanks a lot, Gloria. That really makes me feel better," I said sarcastically. "I didn't mean it like that." "Of course you did. What else could you say? It was only act? That's about the second worst thing you could have said. Get yourself a lawyer. It'll be a couple of months before court, but we need to sort out our property before then. I've already canceled both credit cards and split the money in our accounts. You still have access to the old ones. I've set up new ones. Same with the investments. Your phone should have been cut off an hour ago. The house is yours, so I'm leaving. I'm moving my stuff to Tony's." I left the house keys and garage opener on the table as I walked out. Her last plea echoed after me. Paul, please, I'm sorry." Tony was my best friend. He and his wife, Sophia, owned the top pizza and stromboli joint in town. I was the godfather to their 2-year-old daughter, Diana. When I arrived, my room was prepared. There was no happiness. We just moved my belongings into the house or garage before dinner. My first night there felt odd. Gloria and I had been married for 4 years, living together for another year before that. Throughout those years, we had slept in the same bed no more than a dozen times. I couldn't fall asleep until nearly sunrise. The next workday seemed to drag on forever, and the following week felt even longer. Gloria got her own phone and started calling me. After 6 calls wanting to talk, I blocked her number. Janice faced the same issue with Ralph. He kept calling, begging for forgiveness, while she read his messages to Gloria where he tried to move in with her. Janice kept refusing, convinced I would return to her. She believed I would listen to her at our first meeting with our attorneys. She was mistaken. During that meeting, she insisted on private conversation, but I refused. Finally, I walked out. "Let the court handle it all," I told my lawyer. "I'm not talking to her." 3 months after serving her the divorce papers, we were in court, and it went as most divorces do. Property was split evenly except for her house, which she kept along with everything inside. She didn't contest the adultery, and I paid no alimony. After our case, Janice Godwin divorced Ralph for adultery, gaining the house and alimony. That evening, she and I went to dinner, and she updated me on their lack of communication. Ralph had started seeing another waitress at the truck stop. 2 months later, my divorce was official, but I already felt divorced when the judge finalized it. I considered dating, but focused on work and spending time with my goddaughter, Diana. Feeling like I had overstayed at Tony and Sophia's, I began searching for my own place. I found an apartment and bought used furniture from a charity store. The cashier joked about recruiting me as a volunteer, and I teased back. The furniture was delivered that day, but I had to sleep on my sofa until the mattress store could deliver a bed. A couple of months passed. I considered ocean cruises for single men, but decided against it since it was more for middle-aged folks. Needing another dresser, I returned to the used furniture store. The same cashier didn't recognize me, but I joked, "Are you still recruiting volunteers?" "Yes, we are. Are you interested?" she asked. "It depends on what I'd be volunteering for," I replied. "We need help with various things. Can you drive a truck?" Given my recent history with Ralph Godwin, that was the last thing I wanted to hear. "Absolutely not," I answered firmly and started to leave. "Wait, stop. We have plenty of other tasks that need help," she called after me. There was something in her voice that caught my attention, so I turned back to her. "What kind of work?" I asked. "Try working the cash register like I do. Or you could help unload trucks. You don't need to drive," she quickly added. "There's also work in the back sorting room. Moving things around, sweeping floors. All you need is a willingness to help people. Who should I talk to about this?" I inquired. She smiled warmly. "The office is in the back. They'll sign you up." Without really knowing why, I headed back to the office. Sitting at the desk was a woman who looked about 90 years old. She asked if she could assist me, and I learned she was the secretary for the store manager. "I hear you're looking for volunteers," I mentioned. Her face lit up. Before I knew it, I had spoken with Arch, the store manager whom I didn't particularly like and was scheduled to help with loading and unloading trucks. Since I could only commit to Saturdays, that's when they scheduled me. We had 2 trucks, and whenever people called to donate large furniture or appliances, we'd pick them up. I rode along to help load and unload. I didn't run into the lady who had recruited me again until my 3rd Saturday. After a round of pickups, she came out to inspect what we'd collected. She didn't recognize me even after I reintroduced myself. I realized she had only seen me briefly twice before, so I shouldn't have expected her to remember. She greeted the driver and then introduced herself to me. "Hi, I'm Susan Blake, but everyone calls me Susie," she said as we shook hands. "Hello, I'm Paul Morris. We've met before," I reminded her. "We have? When?" she asked. "At your cash register, twice. You're the one who invited me to volunteer." "Oh, yes, I remember now," she said, although I knew she didn't. She was just being kind. "How do you like it so far?" "It keeps me busy," I replied. I saw Susie 2 more times over the next month, exchanging smiles and hellos each time. 2 months later, I went on a date with a woman I met at the laundromat. We had a drink and dinner, but there was no romantic spark, so we didn't go on another date. While on a furniture pickup in an upscale area with Joseph, the homeowners were renovating, and their daughter was helping. She bumped into me and fell, blaming me and demanding I leave. Joseph suggested we unload the furniture and leave it there. The homeowner apologized for her daughter's behavior, but Joseph insisted we deserved better treatment and didn't need their furniture. We unloaded it and left. Back at the store, the manager, Arch, told us our services were no longer required. Joseph and I went for lunch and a few beers. Later, I received a voicemail from Susie Blake apologizing for the incident and informing me the general manager wanted to meet with me on Monday. I decided not to respond since I had work commitments and didn't need the unpaid volunteer job. Around the same time, I started looking for a house to buy. Susan Blake called me the next Tuesday to inform me that the homeowner had apologized for her daughter's behavior and still wanted to donate the furniture, hiring a moving company to handle it. She also planned to make a generous donation. Susan expected me back on Saturday. I politely declined to return, explaining it wasn't suited to my temperament. Susan expressed regret, but understood. Later, Cynthia Roman, general manager of United Industries, called to discuss the incident without pressuring me to return. I arranged to meet her after work. I liked Cynthia. She explained the company's strategy, emphasizing their reliance on donations and the impact of lost donations on their mission to support children with learning disabilities. She clarified that the organization operated as a non-profit with mostly unpaid volunteers. The furniture we left would have funded 2 tutors for a semester for 4 children. Fortunately, the homeowner didn't blame us, and Joseph admitted it was his idea to leave the furniture. The following Saturday, I was back on the truck with Joseph, who admitted he might have overreacted. A month later, Cynthia approached me. "Mr. Morris, do you have a moment?" she asked. I said yes, and we walked to the front of the truck. "Can I ask you a personal question?" she inquired. "Sure." "Are you married?" I chuckled. "Not anymore." "Was your wife named Gloria?" "Yes." "Ralph Godwin is my brother. Roman is my married name, though I'm no longer married." We exchanged a glance. "He's a jerk, and I'm sorry for what he did to you and your wife." After a brief surprise, I responded, "You don't need to apologize. None of us can control the actions of our difficult relatives. Every family has them." "Well, I apologize anyway for Ralph's behavior." 3 weeks after that meeting, I finalized the purchase of my new house, and Cynthia and I went on our first date, followed by our second. 2 months after she described her brother as unpleasant, Cynthia Roman and I became intimate. It wasn't just ordinary act, it was passionate and intense, leaving us both completely consumed by desire. Her physique was flawless, but more importantly, her enthusiasm and mindset were perfectly aligned. I had never believed in nymphomaniacs until I met Cynthia. Despite her public image, which didn't hint at her private appetite, she had an insatiable drive for closeness. It seemed like her body and mind were always primed for pleasure, stopping only when physically unable to continue. I often wondered what would happen if other men were around when I couldn't keep up with her. For about 6 months, we were incredibly happy together. One Saturday, when Joseph and I had no pickup scheduled, I decided to wash the truck. As I was finishing up behind the building, I heard a man's voice. "You're in trouble, you son of a witch." I turned around and saw Ralph Godwin standing there. "Why do you say that?" I asked. "You're messing around with my sister." "I'm not messing around with your sister. We're dating." "You're only dating her to get back at me." "You're wrong. We're together because we genuinely like each other, and at least neither of us is married." "I'm warning you, stay away from her." "And I'm warning you, stay away from me," I replied. I turned back to work on the truck and noticed someone's head quickly retracting back into the building, indicating they had been eavesdropping on our conversation. I glanced over my shoulder, but Ralph was already gone. 15 minutes later, Cynthia called me. "Was it true?" she asked. "Was what true? That my brother was there?" "He was." "And you talked to him?" "I did." "What did you tell him?" Cynthia asked. "He accused me of dating you to get back at him. I told him we're together because we genuinely like each other." "Is that all?" "Pretty much. Why? Are you sure it wasn't the other way around? You didn't say you were dating me just to spite him?" "No, he said that. I didn't." "Someone overheard you say otherwise." "Well, they either misheard or lied. I've known him a long time and he's never lied to me before." "Does that mean I automatically lied?" There was a pause. "I don't want to see you again, and we don't need your services anymore." "Wait, Cynthia." But she was gone. I went inside to find her, but she wasn't there. Susie was behind the counter. "Who's working today?" I asked her. "Thomas and Arch. Why? Where are they?" "Arch left for lunch a few minutes ago. Thomas is out running an errand." I left the truck cleaning supplies where they were, got in my car, and went home. I tried calling Cynthia, but my number was blocked. I didn't like Arch. He was untrustworthy, unliked by everyone except Cynthia. He was the store manager, and the only other person on staff besides Cynthia who was paid. His secretary was the other. They were the only full-time employees. Everyone else was a volunteer and only worked a few hours each week. After a couple of days, I gave up trying to reach Cynthia. Several weeks later, while grocery shopping, I bumped into Susie. She told me she was now the temporary store manager because Arch had been fired. Cynthia overheard him on the phone admitting he got you fired by lying about you. She confronted him, and he confessed the truth about your conversation with her brother, she explained. I recounted the whole story to her, starting from my ex-wife up until Cynthia told me she didn't want to see me again. "Wow, that's quite a coincidence," remarked Susie. "Yeah, well, it's all in the past now." We talked a bit longer, and then she left. Another month passed by. I decided to get some new furniture for my house. I called Susie and asked if someone could come pick up the furniture I wanted to donate. She said they had a truck and driver available, but no one to help load and unload. I offered to assist, so they sent Joseph with his truck. We loaded everything, and I followed him to the store. While we unloaded and brought the furniture inside, Joseph and I chatted. Cynthia noticed us and approached. "Can I talk to you?" she asked me. Joseph excused himself and left. I remained silent. "I made 2 mistakes, and I'm sorry," she began. "The first and biggest mistake was believing Arch over you. The second mistake was not coming to you as soon as I found out he lied. I was embarrassed and ashamed, and I didn't know how to start apologizing." We locked eyes briefly, but had to break away when the cashier called Cynthia for assistance. "Can't someone else handle it?" Cynthia asked. "No, ma'am, we need you," replied the cashier. Reluctantly, Cynthia excused herself and went to the checkout counter. I was left pondering what to say or do next. Did I want to remain alone and lonely while she was seeking my forgiveness? She returned. "Paul, I'm sorry, but there's an emergency. One of our trucks was in an accident. Can I call you later?" I nodded, and she hurried off. 3 hours later, she called me. "Is everything all right?" I asked her. "Yeah, a new driver backed into a wall, no serious damage, and no one got hurt," she assured me. After a pause, she continued. "Can we talk, Paul, please? Why don't you come over? We can grab a bite to eat," I suggested. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. I took out cold cuts, cheese, bread, and 2 beers from the fridge. We made sandwiches and ate quietly. Afterward, we took our beers to the sofa, and she snuggled close to me. We shared our first kiss, leading to a passionate night that lasted until early morning, and continued the next evening with equal intensity. For the next 4 months, life felt nearly perfect. Cynthia and I discussed living together, with her likely moving in with me. Then Jonah, her lifelong friend, returned from Alaska, and their renewed dinners gradually distanced Cynthia and me until our relationship faded away without explicit discussion. One Saturday, I saw Joseph at a fuel stop and pulled in to chat. He mentioned Cynthia was pregnant and her boyfriend had returned to Alaska. I realized I didn't care anymore. I had moved on. Joseph also noted Susie occasionally mentioned me and had turned down the store manager position because she didn't want to work full-time. While grocery shopping one day, I felt a tap on my shoulder and turned to see a very pregnant Cynthia. "Hello, stranger," she greeted me. "Hello," I replied. We looked at each other for a moment. "You've put on some weight," I remarked. She blushed slightly before responding. "Yeah, I guess I have." There was a pause. "How have you been?" "Not too bad. And you?" I asked. "The same." The silence between us felt awkward. "Well, it was good seeing you again," I said, starting to push my cart away. Paul, would you like to have dinner sometime?" she asked tentatively. I glanced down at her stomach. "I don't think so. I'd be worried another old friend might show up and invite you out to dinner." "That was a mistake, Paul, and I'm sorry," she admitted. "Besides," I added, "what would Jonah say?" "I don't know. I haven't seen him in a couple of months." "Does he know you're pregnant?" "He does. When he found out, he went back to Alaska." "That's too bad. Well, I have to go." "Of course, it was good seeing you again. I walked away from her and didn't hear anything she said after that. A couple more months passed without any dates. I'd occasionally see the trucks around town, but never Joseph, Cynthia, or Susie. During a meeting one day, my boss announced he was retiring immediately. He didn't go into details, but we later learned it was because his wife was ill and he wanted to spend time with her. His replacement, Frederick Johansson, introduced himself to us. I'd heard of him, but never met him before. Frederick invited his senior and mid-level staff to a cookout at his house the following Saturday afternoon. As I pulled into the driveway, his house looked familiar. I was chatting with a colleague and had just gotten a drink when a young woman around my age approached us. "Hello, I'm Christine Johansson, Frederick Johansson's daughter," she introduced herself, shaking hands with my colleague and then reaching for mine. "Don't I know you?" she asked. "We've met," I replied, then excused myself, set down my drink, and started to leave. But before I got far, I heard her speak again. "I remember now. You're the guy who made me trip and fall." I turned back to her. "I didn't make you trip. You weren't watching where you were going and stumbled." "Bullcrap," she retorted. Ignoring her, I left and headed straight to my office. I figured I'd clear out my desk and take what I needed before security escorted me out on Monday morning. True to form, when I arrived on Monday, I was informed that Mr. Johansson wanted to see me. I went to his office and was promptly called in. "You left the party before we had a chance to eat. Then this morning I saw from the security footage that you were here on Saturday," he said with a smile. "Didn't your daughter tell you?" I asked. "Yes, but I'd like to hear your side of the story." "It's pretty straightforward. Some months ago, I was at your house picking up your old donated furniture when your daughter tripped and fell. She accused me of tripping her. I thought once you knew who I was, I'd be fired, so I came in to collect all my personal stuff." Frederick Johansson burst out laughing and stood up. He reached across his desk to shake my hand. "Paul, I've heard this story about some clumsy guy trying to take out my daughter, and it gets funnier every time she tells it." I shook his hand. "It was even funnier when she said you were at the party. You don't look anything like the ogre she described." He leaned back in his chair. Sit down. Frederick and I talked for over an hour. Most of it was about the company and his plans for it, but we also discussed his daughter. "My wife saw everything and agrees with you that it was Chris's fault, but like she's done all her life, she tries to blame everything on others. Tell me, why were you working for them? Aren't we paying you enough?" I chuckled. "I never seem to get paid enough, but that was volunteer work, and I only did it on Saturdays." Good. I wish more people would volunteer. "Are you still doing it?" he asked. So I filled him in on my time there. He laughed again. "You're a sharp guy, or you wouldn't be in your position. As you probably know, that charity you volunteered for pays tutors to help kids with learning problems, but they need unpaid volunteers too. People to handle office work and schedule the tutors. I'd like to open an admin office here and have us become a corporate sponsor. Would you consider organizing that office? It wouldn't be volunteering. It'd be part of your regular job. You're busy now, but it'll keep you even busier. What do you think?" "I need some time to think about it," I replied. "Take all the time you need and let me know by next Monday." he said with a grin. As I was leaving his office, someone leaned over his secretary's desk. She straightened up and collided right into me. Our eyes locked, and hers sparked with annoyance. "You're the clumsiest a-hole I've ever met," she blurted. "Me? Maybe if you looked where you're going instead of charging around like a bull in a china shop?" I retorted. "Bull in a china shop? What kind of expression is that?" she snapped back. "It means reckless, something you seem very familiar with. You might want to consider getting a guide dog to help you navigate. They're smart enough to watch where they're going," I quipped, hearing laughter from behind me. Frederick Johansson was standing in his office doorway. "Give me a call, Paul, and let's get started," he said as I left. The rest of the week kept me busy, leaving little time to ponder his proposal. I considered that accepting might earn me some favor since it was his pet project, but doing it for that reason didn't sit right with me. Monday morning found me outside his office, still undecided. It wasn't until I faced him that I knew my answer. I walked up to his desk and stood before him. "Well, Paul, are we going to move forward with this?" he asked. "Yes, sir, we are," I replied firmly, making my decision in that moment. "Good man," he nodded approvingly. "Oh, damn," I heard from behind me. "Dad, I can't work with him," she said. I turned to see her and asked what she meant. "Both of you, sit down," Mr. Johansson directed firmly. We reluctantly took our seats, glaring at each other. "Paul, Chris has been at this for a while and knows what's needed." "Chris, Paul wants to help, so I suggest you both settle your differences and come up with a plan to assist these kids. Do I make myself clear?" he said sternly, looking at each of us in turn. I started to protest, but he knew how to persuade me. "This isn't about egos, Paul. It's about helping kids who need it to succeed," he emphasized. "Yes, sir. I'm all in." "Great. Now move your workload over to Thompson as much as you can. I've spoken to him and he's prepared for it. After that, spend some time with Chris to understand what she needs from you. Clear?" "Yes, sir. And yes, Daddy," slipped out simultaneously. We exited his office and stood silently in the reception area. Finally, I broke the silence. "Where should we set up? The conference room, I guess. I'll bring over some files so you can get a feel for our processes." "Okay, see you tomorrow morning at 9. "Fine." With that, she left, nearly tripping on a rug edge before shooting me a warning glance. I kept quiet. The next day, she wheeled in several boxes of files using a dolly. We set up in the conference room and worked fairly smoothly all morning, had lunch separately, then continued working into the afternoon. By day's end, she confirmed she'd be back the next morning to continue. I reminded her I had other responsibilities and would let her know when I could focus more on the tutoring project. Later that week, on Thursday, I called her to arrange another session for the next day, and she was available. We continued our pattern of working together peacefully for 2 days each week. The following week, she proposed meeting with one of our funding sources, and I agreed. She arranged a lunch meeting, and to my surprise, Cynthia showed up at the restaurant, very visibly pregnant. I'd completely forgotten about her. Chris introduced us, and Cynthia reminded us that we already knew each other as old friends. "Paul here was the one who left the furniture in your driveway, if you remember," she added. "Oh, I remember. I just forgot it was your company." I leaned back while they hashed out budgets, targets, tutors, and other stuff. Once they wrapped up and we were ready to leave, Cynthia asked if I'd seen Susie. "No, should I have?" I replied. "Not necessarily. She's seeing a really nice guy," Cynthia said. "Good for her." After some more small talk, Chris and I got into my car and headed back to the office. "Is that your baby?" Chris suddenly asked. I glanced at her. "What made you think of that?" "I know you used to be involved with her, so I figured." "How do you know about that?" "I noticed her watching you." "What does that mean?" "It means she still wants you." "Not happening ever." "How did she manage to upset you?" "That's none of your business." "She might tell me herself." "Let her." There was a long silence. "The Susie she mentioned, does she work at her store?" "Yes." "Did you have a thing with her too? Are you jealous?" "Ha! Jealous? Not a chance!" "Susie and I were just friends." There was a pause before Chris asked, "I don't see a ring. Are you married?" "No." "Have you ever been married?" "Yes. Have you?" "No. Why did you get divorced?" "She cheated." The rest of the drive to the office was quiet. Things changed after that. We had already been working well together, but it got even better. She paid more attention, liked most of my ideas, and I found myself enjoying her company. Eventually, I couldn't handle both jobs, so I talked to the boss. He said to focus on working with Chris, and he'd handle my other tasks. He estimated a couple more weeks of heavy workload before I could manage it in just a few hours a week. Chris and I started hanging out together socially. We went to dinners, danced, visited piano bars, basically everything except having closeness. I tried a couple of times, but she made it clear that wasn't going to happen. Despite that, we still had a good time together until things changed. After finishing the planning phase of our project and discussing that it only needed one person to run it now, Chris left the conference room. Soon after, her father called me to his office, so I headed over. As I entered his reception area to give him an update, I overheard Chris talking. He must be lacking real people skills, otherwise he wouldn't have lost 2 women, Chris was saying. Really? It was Mr. Johansson's secretary. I'm trying to boost his self-esteem, Chris continued. He's actually a nice guy. Yeah, and cute, Chris added. He's funny, smart, and enjoyable to be around. Just needs a little work? The secretary asked. Chris laughed. Yes, he needs a little work. That's when I walked in. I knew they were discussing me because they looked up as I entered. Well, I'm glad my self-esteem is intact, I said. I feel bad for the poor guy you two were talking about. For a moment, I thought it might be me, but then I realized you, Chris, would definitely tell me if I needed a little work. Paul, I'm sorry, Chris started. But on behalf of men everywhere, thanks for trying to help that other guy out, I continued. I'm sure he'd thank you if he knew what you were doing for him. I looked directly at Chris. Since you're so concerned about him, you don't have to spend any more time with me. You can focus on him. Chris stumbled over her words, turning red. I came to update your father, I finally said, breaking the awkward silence, and walked into his office with her following closely behind. Hey, good to see you both here, he greeted us. How about an update? I jumped in before she could. We've reached a point where only one of us is necessary. Since Christine has the experience, I think it should be her. That way I can return to my regular job. Do you agree, Chris? He asked. She glanced at me before responding. Probably. I didn't look at her, but I could sense her eyes on me, and I saw his gaze shifting between us. He didn't reach his position by being foolish. All right. Both of you take the rest of the day off. I'll think about it and let you know on Monday. Chris, could you stay for a minute? Paul, have a nice weekend. Thank you. I was out of the building in less than 5 minutes. It would have been easy to mope at home all weekend, but I didn't. My best friend Tony and his wife Sophia were going out of town and asked if I could babysit my goddaughter Diana. I gladly accepted, packed an overnight bag, and headed to their place. It was a delightful weekend. I did everything a godparent or grandparent should do, spoiled Diana, and then handed her back to her parents. We did all her favorite things until Sunday evening when her parents returned and I went home. Christine tried to call me several times on Friday afternoon and evening, a few more on Saturday, and twice on Sunday. I wasn't eager to go to work on Monday, but I didn't want to avoid a confrontation either. As usual, I stopped by my office first to tidy up from the weekend before heading to the conference room. She was already there working, so I turned around and went back to my office. Just before the end of the workday, I was summoned to her father's office. She was already there. Okay, I've made my decision. Chris, it's yours to lead. Paul, you're mostly back to your regular job, but I want you to assist Chris as needed. Additionally, I want you to help recruit more tutors and find more kids who need our help. There are plenty of both out there. Let's find them and bring them together. We acknowledged his decision and silently returned to the conference room. Once there, I began wrapping up my tasks and updated Christine on where things stood. She nodded but remained quiet. When I finished, I headed towards the door to leave. Paul? She called out. I halted, turned back to face her. I'm sorry. I didn't mean what I said. I stared at her. No interpersonal skills, Christine? Do you realize how devastating that was to hear? And then to find out you were only spending time with me out of pity? I shook my head. Others may have hurt me, but you shattered me to the core. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she began sobbing before I could walk away. For the rest of the week, I kept to my office, catching up on work, and avoided seeing Christine altogether. That pattern continued for the next month. I threw myself into work, ignoring everything else. Then Mr. Johansson called me into his office. Paul, I have a situation, but first, I want to commend you on the excellent work you did with Chris. The early results are promising, and many kids will benefit greatly from it. Thank you. I'm planning the next phase and may need your input, if not your assistance. Thank you, I replied. Now, on to my situation. Robbie Singlaub resigned today, leaving a vacancy in the planning division. The job requires an MBA. You don't have one, but on one hand, you have the talent, knowledge, and leadership skills needed. On the other hand, promoting you over others could be seen as favoritism, due to the outside work you did for me and rumors about you and my daughter. I had heard those rumors, and a couple of colleagues had even mentioned them openly. I had dismissed them, not dignifying them with a response. So, I'm caught between a rock and a hard place. You and I both know there's nothing between you and her, but rumors are hard to quash, no matter how much evidence there is to the contrary. Mr. Johansson came over from Barnes, a rival company. Even when he was their CEO, they had tried to recruit me, and just 2 weeks before our meeting, I had received job offers from them. Let me ask you something hypothetical, I proposed. Barnes has offered me the role of planning division manager, the same position we're discussing here. You have other qualified candidates. Why shouldn't I just take Barnes's offer? It could solve a few issues. No way. Barnes would be getting the better end of the deal, so that's not an option unless you flat out resign, which I hope you won't. We sat quietly for a moment. What happened between you and Chris anyway? I thought things were going well. I chuckled. We got off to a rough start, but we managed to get along better for a while. So what changed? She won't talk about it. It doesn't matter now. What's done is done. All right, forget it. You're the new planning division manager effective immediately. You'll be the youngest division manager in the company's history. HR will discuss your new salary and benefits, and you'll move into Singlaub's old office, the only other corner office on the 7th floor. I think you'll like it. You can keep his secretary or find one of your own. Let maintenance know if you want any changes made. Thank you. I'm honored. Don't thank me yet. You're going to be working hard. And by the way, division managers and their spouses or guests are invited to dinner at my house on Friday at 6:30. It's black tie. I'll be there, but I won't have a spouse or guest. Fair enough, he replied. I got to his house at 6:15 and was led into the living room. I took the drink they offered and mingled with the other guests. When I peeked into the dining room, I noticed every seat had a name tag. The one next to mine read Christine Johansson. As I stared at it, I felt someone approach. It was her. My mom insists on boy-girl seating at formal dinners, so here I am. Sorry in advance if I'm quiet, she said. We didn't talk during appetizers, but by the salad course, I started small talk to break the ice. A few times I caught myself admiring how attractive she was, something I hadn't noticed before. She excused herself after dessert, and I didn't see her the rest of the night. My first month at the new job wasn't as tough as I expected, and I began to relax. One morning, my secretary told me Christine Johansson had called for an appointment. I set it for tomorrow morning, but I wondered if she really needed one, or if being who she is, she could just drop by. I thought the rumor mill might have reached my secretary. What do you mean, being who she is? I asked. She didn't hint at anything else. I didn't know if being the CEO's daughter gave her special access. I grinned. Do you think it should? She grinned back. Definitely. Then so do I. Let her know she can come by any time, and I'll see her when I'm free. She laughed and returned to her desk. The next morning, Christine arrived at her appointed time, and I stood to greet her. Good morning, I said, motioning for her to sit. How can I help you? Do you remember Cynthia from the charity store? I sure do. You thought I was the father of her baby. She blushed. I didn't think that. I just wondered if you might be. So what's up with her? She wants to host a barbecue for some of her top partners, and she's invited both of us to attend. I was wondering if you're free. I started to respond, but she cut me off. Paul, please don't say something like, wouldn't I be embarrassed by your lack of social skills? You know I wouldn't, and I regret saying it. It wasn't true then, and it isn't true now. I can't explain why I said those words, but I wish I hadn't. I think I was just trying to impress Daddy's secretary, but I did say it, and I apologize. I looked at her, seeing she was holding back tears. When? I asked. She told me the date, and I checked my calendar. I was available. I'll meet you there, I assured her. She seemed about to say more, but changed her mind. The day of the barbecue arrived, and I was there. Joseph was grilling while Cynthia and Susie were hosting. When Christine showed up, Susie linked arms with us and introduced us to other partners, praising our contributions to the program. Christine knew most of the guests. Once I thought I could slip away, I headed over to Joseph by the grill. We talked and had some beers until Susie joined us. How have you been? She asked. Great. How about you? Not too bad, she replied. We continued chatting until Christine joined us. Can I get you another drink? She offered. No thanks. I've had my fill and I'm heading home. I finished my beer, tossed the bottle, shook hands with Joseph, said goodbye to him, Susie, and then Christine, and started to leave. I was almost at my car when Christine grabbed my arm. We need to talk, she said. We have nothing to discuss. Yes, we do. I apologize for what I said. It wasn't true, and I regret saying it. Okay, apology accepted. Now we've got nothing more to discuss. I walked away before she could say another word. Sitting next to her at dinner, seeing her good looks was one thing, but I couldn't shake off the words like, he must not have any social skills, otherwise he wouldn't have lost 3 women. And I feel sorry for him, so I'm spending time with him to boost his self-esteem. Those words were stuck in my mind, and I feared they would linger there for a long time. For 3 months, I avoided any interaction with her. My office was on the same floor as her father's, but at opposite ends of the building. I heard she got an office on the 5th floor where the accounting offices were, so our paths rarely crossed. Once I was in the elevator going down alone. It stopped at the 5th floor, and the door opened to reveal her standing there. She saw me and hesitated. "I'll take the next one," she said. I reached out and held the door open. "That's ridiculous. Come on in." Reluctantly, she stepped into the elevator, and we rode in silence to the garage level where we each had our private parking spots. Mine was labeled with my name, and hers was marked reserved. The silence continued as we went our separate ways to our cars. Another month passed. I was in my office when my secretary brought in 2 police officers. She had a big grin on her face. "Mr. Morris, you need to come with us," one of the officers said. I was shocked. "Why?" "For the tutor program. Someone has issued a warrant for your arrest, and you'll need to stay in custody until bail is paid." It turned out to be a fundraiser for the tutor program where fake arrests were made, and the bail was raised through donations from family and friends. I wasn't allowed to pay my own bail. I chuckled and went along with them. They took me to a retail store where I was seated in a roped-off area with other arrestees. The deputy mayor and a popular local TV personality were already there. The TV personality was broadcasting live to promote the fundraiser and started interviewing me, asking who had me arrested. I don't know. "Well," she said, aiming the microphone at my face, "now's your chance to ask your family and friends to donate enough to get you out of here." I chuckled, took the microphone, looked into the camera, and appealed to anyone watching to help bail me out. They didn't tell me how much I needed to raise, though. In our jail area, there was plenty of food, drinks, and comfortable seating. Every 15 minutes, they updated us on how much had been donated in our names. I was having a good time, especially with Julie, the TV lady who went live every 15 minutes to solicit donations for her bail. After a couple of hours, Susie walked by, saw me, and burst into laughter. "Who had you arrested?" she asked. "I have no idea." She stayed and we chatted for a few minutes. Soon after, I heard the bailiff announce, "You're free to go, Mr. Morris." Julie handed me her card with her cell number. "Call me and we'll talk about our time served together." I grinned and walked out. The same police officers who had arrested me took me back to my office. I have my own private entrance, so Shirley, my secretary, only knew I was back when I told her, which I usually did by stepping out to grab a coffee. As I opened my door to do just that, I overheard her talking. It was hilarious when they came to get him. He laughed the whole time and wanted to know who had him arrested. No way. I wasn't going to tell him it was you. He'd end us both. "No, I haven't heard from him. When are you bailing him out?" "Oh, you did? When?" Then she laughed. "No, I haven't seen him, but I don't think he'll agree to it." "Well, good luck. Let me know what happens." She ended the call and started to work, but glanced up and saw me. "Oh, you're back." I smiled and confirmed that I was back, then turned and headed into my office. I'd barely sat down when Shirley came in and stood by my desk. "How did it go?" she asked. "Pretty good, actually. It was almost enjoyable," I replied. She grinned. "Christine told me she planned to have you arrested for the charity event. She said she'd pay your bail if you agreed to dinner with her." I couldn't help but laugh, and assured Shirley there was no chance of that happening. Her phone rang and she went to answer it, leaving my office door open. "No, he was actually laughing about it," I overheard her saying. "I think so, Christine, but it seems like a lost cause. Anyway, good luck." She closed the door and returned to her work. The next day, the division chiefs had a meeting with Mr. Johansson. As we left, Christine was waiting in his reception area. "Paul, do you have a minute?" she asked. The other chiefs glanced at me, some smiling as they left. "Let's walk down the hall." We left her father's office area and strolled down the corridor. "I hope you weren't too upset yesterday," she said. "I found it pretty amusing," I replied. She smiled. "I thought that if I bailed you out, you might agree to dinner with me so I could apologize again for my stupid remarks." "Another apology isn't necessary. Let's just forget about it," I said. "In that case, would you still have dinner with me anyway?" I stopped, looked at her, and said firmly, The answer is no. She met my gaze. That's final, isn't it? You'll never go out with me, will you? No, I won't. You have to understand, I'd never be sure if you were just trying to make up for what you said, or if you genuinely wanted to go out with me. We stood there in silence for a while before she nodded and walked away. 3 months passed, during which I caught only glimpses of Christine as we moved around the building. Meanwhile, I started seeing Julie, the TV reporter. We became intimate on our third date and continued meeting 2 or 3 times a week after that, but it was strictly a physical relationship. Christmas was approaching, and Mr. Johansson planned a party for his division chiefs. I had been there for about 30 minutes when I overheard Mr. and Mrs. Johansson in the kitchen as I passed on my way to the bathroom. She won't come down as long as he's here. I told you not to invite him. Christ, Lucy. He's one of my top people. He's significantly boosted the planning division's performance. How could I not invite him? Besides, I like him. Chris just messed up, that's all. What have I told you about your language, Fred? I'm sorry, but your daughter's actions have caused problems with him at least twice. Is it any wonder he wants nothing to do with her? I know, but she really cares about him. That's unfortunate, but I'm on his side. But she's your daughter. Can't you do something? Like what? Fire him if he won't date her? Well, for Christ's sake, Lucy, go check on our guests. I hurried back to the living room, forgetting about the bathroom. I was chatting with another guest and his wife when the Johanssons entered. I made it through the party, occasionally glancing at the stairs to see if Christine would appear, but she didn't. After a few more casual dates with Julie, my friend with benefits, and some more intimate moments, I found myself thinking more and more about Christine. On Christmas Eve, as I was leaving to spend the evening with Tony, Sophia, and Diana, I was backing out of the garage when another car pulled into the driveway beside me. I stepped out just as Christine got out of her car and walked towards me. She spoke first. What do I have to do to convince you? We stood there silently. What do I have to do to prove that I didn't mean what I said? I'm just a woman who likes a man and wants him to like her back. I looked at her tear-streaked face and realized she didn't need to do anything to convince me. She already had. You can come with me to spend the evening with Tony and his family. She smiled. Really? Come on. I walked around to the passenger side of my car and opened the door for her, enjoying the view of her legs as she sat down. During the ride, Christine and I were quiet, lost in our thoughts. Tony, Sophia, and Diana were familiar with each other, but Tony and Sophia were surprised to see Christine. The evening was pleasant, filled with good food and laughter, especially as Diana entertained us. She was thrilled with the dollhouse she got to open. After putting Diana to bed, the adults enjoyed drinks while assembling her toys. On the way back, Christine stayed on her side of the car. When we arrived, we talked until 2 a.m. on Christmas morning. I invited her to dinner the next day. I spent Christmas Day alone, but Christine joined me for dinner the following day. We dined together 3 times that week and spent New Year's Eve watching old movies, eating popcorn, and enjoying root beer floats. We kissed at midnight, and it felt different, more promising. Over the next few weeks, we spent most of our free time together. Though I met her father twice during this period, we never spoke privately, but I noticed his glances. On Valentine's Day, we made love for the first time at my house. I decided to take the lead, breaking the pattern of her initiating everything. She had previously apologized multiple times and made grand gestures to win back my affection. We were cuddled together on the sofa. My right arm was around her, and she was nestled into me, with one of her hands in her lap and mine covering it, and the other hand on my leg just above my knee. Once I reached the button, I didn't hesitate. It was undone quickly, followed by the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th buttons. She showed her agreement by pulling her blouse out of her jeans and letting it fall to the floor. If I thought that was fast, the rest happened even quicker. In no time, we were moving towards my bedroom, shedding clothes as we went. My ex was good, and so was Julie from TV. Cynthia was excellent, but Christine surpassed them all. If her goal was to prove a point or show me she was truly sorry, she succeeded. The passion she brought to our intimacy was beyond anything I had imagined possible. She threw herself into it enthusiastically, again and again. At work that week, we stuck to having lunch in either her office or mine, but we kept our intimacy out of the workplace. The Monday after that intense week of intimacy, I was summoned to her father's office. It seems the rumor mill is churning again, he said. Oh, what's the latest gossip? Cut the nonsense, Paul. Before I consider firing you, I need to know how long you plan on keeping this up. Keeping what up? Punishing Christine for what she said. She believes you've forgiven her, but I'm not so sure. I've seen how tough you can be in business, and I'd hate to see my daughter led astray. Mr. Johansson, nothing could be further from the truth. Christine is an incredible woman, as you know, and my feelings for her are sincere. In fact, I think I might be in love with her. He was taken aback. Well, I wasn't expecting that. Have you told her? No, sir. Actually, I didn't realize it until this moment. He smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from him. Funny how life works sometimes. Yes, sir, it is. So, what's next? I suppose I'll clean out my desk and look into opportunities at Barnes, since you mentioned firing me. He stopped smiling. Why would you do that? Because you said you were considering firing me. That was then. This is now. Get back to work. That spring, Christine and I took a vacation together. We flew to Greece and sailed through the islands. The Christmas after that, I asked her to marry me. 2 nights later, we had dinner with her parents. And ever since then, we've dined with them at least once every 2 weeks for the past 7 years. 4 years ago, we welcomed their first grandchild, and last year, their second. We're not planning to add any more to the family.